Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. One question I get asked, how do I find talk therapists to interview? Honestly, I start with my peers and colleagues first, the ones I've known for a while, the ones I sit with at conferences, the ones who I can text and ask for clinical guidance, the ones who meet me for coffee and we can just sit and share ideas, the ones who are the first to reach out and support me when I need some good old peer support. And my interviewee today is that person. I'm excited to interview Dr. Kristina Seymour, a clinical psychologist, author, publisher, coach, and motivational speaker. And in this episode, we aren't really going to chat about clinical issues, but about writing, sharing your stories, and finding platforms for creatively making a difference in the lives of others. Dr. Kristina Seymour has been through a lot in her life, and she'll get into her story in the interview. Yet what is amazing to me is that she has turned her challenges into triumphs, her struggles into wins, while sharing her story in the most congruent and authentic way. There are so many good nuggets in this interview, and I hope you are inspired to go after your dreams and live your most authentic life. Let's hop into the interview. So hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the Talk Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and today I have a very special guest on the show. And it's funny to think back how we first met because I feel like I've known this woman forever. And I don't know if it's my age and memory, but I had to text her this morning and ask her, how did we first meet? Because I could not remember. But no matter how long we've known each other, I feel like I've known her my entire adult life. Dr. Kristina Seymour is not just a good friend, but an incredible psychologist with so much to offer to the world. It's hard to sum up all her skills and accomplishments in my intro, so I'm going to let her share more as I get going. But I did ask for her official bio, and I think it's important to cover a couple of the paragraphs because she's done some really incredible things, and I would be fearful of trying to recreate it in just a couple sentences. So here we go. Dr. Kristina Seymour is a clinical psychologist, a trauma recovery specialist working with veterans and civilians who desire to not only survive tragedy, but thrive in life. Having learned how to continually overcome through her own tragedies of various forms of trauma, including a traumatic brain injury at the age of 7 that resulted in her near death, an estimated poor quality of life, and minimum cognitive abilities, she overcame the odds and completed her doctorate in clinical psychology in 2014. As a result, she continually seeks to combine common sense and insight into all of her work, acknowledging the realities of the challenges, injuries, and very real obstacles, while simultaneously not allowing them to define or limit one's potential. She is a natural encourager, and I mean it, y'all. She truly is. She began writing and running in elementary school, embarking on a quest to make meaning out of and find hope in the midst of darkness. She views the therapeutic process in much the same way as she views writing. Dr. Seymour is passionate about walking alongside those who desire to reach their potential. While she is a trauma recovery clinical psychologist, she's also the founder of her 2016 full-service publishing and marketing company, Share & Company. She believes that everyone has a story to tell, and she works with those who desire to share their time, testimony, talent, and treasure, as well as transform them into tangible forms of excellence. Through the process of writing, publishing, and consulting with others to do the same, she also loves to develop products that represent the author and speaker's message in order to further propel it to the masses, creating a momentum of encouragement, hope, and perseverance. So welcome to the Therapy Show, Dr. Seymour. I am so excited to have you as a guest. I'm over here. You're welcome. I'm like wiggling in my chair, just so happy to have you here. And this is a dream of mine to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Your bio is incredible. And what I love about your bio, not only does it sum up all your accomplishments, but when you're sitting face to face with Dr. Kristina and you're having a conversation, she is a true encourager. She hears you fully. She's right there with you. She's taking notes. She's helping you move forward in your goals.
You really don't even, do you even know you do that work because when we met a couple of weeks ago, I walked away feeling I could accomplish anything just by,
Oh, wow.
yeah. And you inspired me so much to keep going and to go after my goals and dreams. So I want to just talk a little bit first about, I ask every guest, how did you decide to become a talk therapist? Or in your case, how did you decide to become a psychologist?
Sure. Well, first I want to say that I felt the same way when I left meeting with you. So you do the same. I think we have a mutual fan club.
Yes, we do.
And also, I decided to become a therapist. Really, it was not my plan A. My plan A was to be a literature professor. I was majoring in English. I have always written, and so I always planned to teach. And I thought, what better way to be able to write as well, teach during the school season, write during the summers. But then my senior year at Georgia State University, I was blessed with my son, Jacob, which is a surprise blessing. But we found out when he was 10 months old that he was profoundly deaf. Mm. And honestly, everything I had been studying and focusing on as my mission, as far as Shakespeare and Blake and Emerson and Frank Douglas and all these amazing writers, just really fell flat for me as far as spending the rest of my life focusing on them. And so I took a step back and I thought, what do I really want to do that is going to encourage others and help them persevere and overcome, not only for myself, my son, and my family, but to be able to give that back for a career. So I took a step back. I got my master's in counseling, and then I got my doctorate in clinical psychology.
Wow. I didn't realize that you were going to be a literature professor.
I was.
Interesting how life hands us things, and from those experiences and from going through stuff, everything shifts. Everything shifts. Well, our lifelong lay plans can change in a second. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful that you changed up and you came into the world of therapy, because I think you're a phenomenal therapist. And
thank you.
So can you share, where did you go to get your doctorate?
So I went to Georgia Professional School of Psychology in Atlanta, and it's been around 30 plus years. They used to just focus on clinical practice. They have expanded it to other disciplines with education and business management and that kind of thing. Originally, it was just clinical psychology.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And I know that, so along the way to becoming a psychologist, you also started something else. What was that?
So are you referring to Sharon Company?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Sharon Company.
Yeah. Well, and actually, if I could back up, I've always written. So I have written my entire life, whether it be poems, short stories, research papers that I was doing on my own out of my own interest, or research papers for a degree. I've always written. Originally, it was just creative writing, and then it became more clinical or more kind of on purpose to teach a message or make a point, that kind of thing. Okay. So I've always written, and throughout the course of writing, especially I would say the last probably 10 years, I've had a lot of people approach me, whether it be on the soccer field when I was an active soccer mom, or whether it be at church or in the community. People would ask me, how do I write a book? They would say, I have ideas and I want to get started, but I just don't know how to get started. Mm-hmm. And they knew that I was continually writing, so that they would ask me for advice or encouragement, or so I really started, on the soccer fields and just in the community talking with, people who would ask me. It then turned into me helping them on a more consistent basis. And the more I thought, wait a minute, I really need to actually organize this and do something more with it, so that I can have more of a focused effort and then get more results for people and for myself as well. So I decided to start Share and Company, which is a full service publishing and marketing company. And I will back up and say another reason that I did that is I was published by a traditional publisher in 2000. My first book, God and Coffee in That Order, was published by a traditional publisher out of Texas. And what I learned from that experience, though I was very thankful for it, the cover of the book did not end up being my original vision for it, which was really God and Coffee is about living by faith in the midst of everyday life. It's just about an everyday woman who, is married, which is me, but think of cartoon version of, which is me, married with kids, working full time, going to school full time. And people would always say, how do you work full time and go to school full time and have a family? And for years, I said God and Coffee in that order, which simply means by a lot of prayer and a lot of caffeine. And I mean, that is truly, truly how I live, even still to this day. So when I became pregnant with my son, Jacob, I remember going down to Georgia State after working at the law firm where I worked in downtown Atlanta full time, and drove down there very pregnant, paid my $5 for parking on the, fifth level of the parking garage. And I was so big, pregnant wise, I could not get out of my car. I was in compact parking, and they really mean compact, because I could not get out of my car with my belly. I couldn't even try to climb over and get out the other side. I was literally stuck. And I sat there for a moment and I was like, okay, so I need to drive back home because I cannot attend this class tonight. And really, I need to just stop and take a step back. So with that first book that I wrote, I told my husband, if I'm not going to go to school right now, I was a couple classes from finishing my 4-year degree. I'm not going to write papers to finish this degree. I'm also not going to just keep writing. I'm going to write a book. And he said, what are you going to write? And I said, God and Coffee in that order. Because that is literally, I had been living the story for years.
Right.
It took me 10 years to get my 4-year degree, and I'd been saying that for a long time. So I sat down and I wrote memoirs and the poetry that was inspired due to that specific memoir. So whether it be a memory from childhood, whether it be a moment with my children, whether it be, the smell of baked cookies, or whatever it is or was that would inspire the poem, because there's always something that would inspire the poem. So I wrote the memoir, I had the poem, and then I found a scripture that matched kind of that theme. Mm-hmm. Sent it to 40 publishers, received 39 rejection letters and 1 phone call. And this traditional publisher published it. But the cover of the book was to be a cartoon of me literally inside a huge coffee cup, kind of, like peering over the sides, where just my eyes and maybe 1 foot over here to try to get out of the mug. And it said, God and Coffee in that order, living by faith in the midst of everyday life. And I really think that the cover of a book needs to represent the message. It needs to represent the personality of the author. It needs to represent the message and draw in the reader. Mm-hmm. So the traditional publisher, I was 24. I was so excited to have a book contract. I thought, this is it, that, the rest of my life is taken care of. I'll be a writer from here on out, and all the bills will be paid, and, things will be amazing. The traditional publisher had all the authority because I gave them that, I agreed to 8% royalties, and they did everything, which is great because it's a lot of money to produce a book, from editing to layout to graphic design and just all of it, and then printing it. It's a lot of money. So I was excited. However, the cover of the book, and you can still find this on Amazon, was a picture of a man's hand holding it was a man's hand, not even a woman's hand. So a man's hand holding a coffee cup with this light, shining down, and a faded image of the Bible in the background.
Right.
So when I would do book signings at Borders or Barnes and Noble, but when I would do book signings, people would come up to me and say, what is that about a male preacher choosing what coffee to drink? And I would say, no, it's about living by faith in the midst of everyday life. So essentially the cover did not represent the book at all. And that publishing company went out of business. They were then bought by another traditional publisher who picked up the book. And then I got a letter saying, thank you, but no thank you. With all due respect, we thought this book would be a bestseller, and we're going to go ahead and let it go because it wasn't. And I said, with all due respect, it is not a bestseller yet. And the cover does not represent the message. So I know that is a very long way to say that one of the other motivations for Sharon Company was to not only produce my own works with the original message and personality that is intended, but to also help other people do the same and to assure that there was a level of excellence every time and that we would not settle for anything less than that. And so over the years, I have thankfully met people, very skilled and talented people who work with me, especially Libby LeBlanc, my graphic designer. She's amazing. She takes my ideas and then creates them with tangible excellence. I mean, every time she nails it. So I'm very thankful for her. And then she also helps those who come to Sharon Company do the same.
Wow. That is incredible. And I remember when you shared that story with me a couple of weeks ago, I mean, I was just, I had no idea. I had no idea that was your history. And I was just, I came away just so inspired, and I was like, man, that is the coolest thing ever, what she's doing. And she self-publishes and she helps other writers get started. And I think what's really cool is, and I'm just going to go ahead and give my little process with this, is as a talk therapist, sometimes we love what we do and we love helping people and we love to support them and we love to help them, walk with them and help them through their stuff. But there's also other skills that we develop along the way or that we have before we come into this field. And I love hearing stories about other therapists out there who have taken their skill set and are doing other things with it, not just. And so I think it's important to know that if you are a talk therapist out there and maybe you are wondering, is this it? Is there more for me to do? Can I take this skill set and put it in a new direction? Yeah, you totally can. Here, you're a writer before you were a therapist, but you're still pursuing. I mean, you are doing it and you've transformed it into other areas of your life too. And I just think it's so cool. I just love it. I love how you have created this, I don't even know what you call it, career, this inspiring, motivational way of doing your work. It's just really cool, Kristina. It's so, so cool. So
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, really, I have to say that the therapeutic process for me is much like writing a story or helping somebody tell their story in a cohesive way. I think a lot of times, one of my mottos with Sharon Company is everybody has a story to tell, and everybody does have a story to tell. Now, whether that be in book format or not is unique to the individual. Not everybody wants to write a book, which is also why I help people write a book. If they don't want to write the book, I write it for them. I'm the ghostwriter. Okay. So if you want to be a good steward of that story, to be able to share it with others, even if it's just your own family, for whatever the reason is, to pass down that legacy of perseverance or whatever the life lessons are that you have. I help people tell a story. And so, with a beginning, middle, and an end. I think a lot of times when people come to therapy, obviously they're struggling with something and not do it alone. I mean, we all need somebody on a continuous basis. I mean, we do best when we are connected and when we are in community. So usually when someone comes to therapy, they are in a place where they can't quite put all the pieces together where it makes sense. And I do want to say that not everything we experience is going to, make sense. Horrible things we can't make sense of. But if we can make meaning out of the difficulties and the struggle, find a way to pull that resilience out and say, okay, how am I going to take this that I'd be much happier if it never happened to me, if it never happened to those I love and that kind of thing. But since we can't control that, how do I take this and then pay it forward? Not only for myself, because that kind of energy recycles itself, but for others. How do I reach back and help somebody not endure such a long, lonely, hard journey? And so essentially with the therapeutic process, as I talk with them over the many weeks and months and sometimes, a year or plus, how do I help them tell their story in a cohesive way and going from the victim in their story to the victor in their story? So that's what I essentially help people do, whether it's talking with them one-on-one or whether it's talking with them one-on-one as they write their story to publish it. It's the same process for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's a really good way of phrasing what it is that we do, because people always want to know, like, as a therapist, like, well, what do you say? Like, what's the magic that you say to them? And my first response to that is we listen. We listen like our lives depend on it. I mean, really, What's what we do. And we just help people process what they're sharing with us. And I think that sounds so foreign to so many people because maybe they've never been given that space or they've never taken that time to do that for themselves. So I love how you are a listener and a storyteller and a connector and an encourager. And it's just really cool what you're doing. So,
oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think also that, when my son was 10 months old and I found out that he was profoundly deaf, literally my world just stopped. And all of a sudden, everything was fast. I mean, I looked up the speed of sound, which if I remember correctly, I think is like 742 miles per hour or something. Okay. Everything is fast. And I also had been told that I walked very fast. I was always on mission. I was always on point. I walked like I, was either, on a football team or still in the military. And, I was being timed. It's all about, timing and that stopwatch and doing a certain task by a certain point for the mission and passing with flying colors so that you can then actually do the mission. So, I mean, I was always just, walking fast and talking fast and moving fast. And when I found out that my son Jacob was profoundly deaf, everything just stopped. And it's like when you get news that you don't want to get, it's like everything stops, but everything keeps spinning and you feel very dizzy, for a while, for days or months or years. And I sat down on the floor with my son and I was looking at him and I realized as he looks at my face, he can hear what my face is saying. As I move, he can hear what are those movements saying. So if I'm, if I have this kind of very intense look that I've been known to have, my resting face, my husband says I sleep like that. Yeah. So what does my face say to him? How loud are my facial expressions? How loud are my movements? And so it really forced me to slow down in all that I do. And I wrote a book during the 4 years that I took my son to the Atlanta Speech School called Do You Hear What I Hear? And it's really our family's journey about learning how to listen with your heart, not your ears. And I think that experience, though I didn't choose that, and this is what I mean by making meaning out of struggle. What we learned as a family was to listen to our hearts, to slow down, to really pay attention and to be very present. And so as a therapist, I think that is a benefit in that I listen. I try to listen for what is not being said, not just what is being said, because there's profound information in there if we listen. But we need to listen with our hearts, not just our ears, not just with our training, not just with our education, not just with, whatever type of treatment we're using. We need to listen really with our hearts. So, yeah, I think that is beneficial.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't know that. Another book. What was the name of that book again?
Do You Hear What I Hear?
Do You Hear What I Hear? Okay.
Learning how to listen with your heart.
Okay. Another one I need to write that you've written. I had another question as you were speaking that came to mind. So as you were just sharing about being a listener and listening not with just your head, but with your heart and listening for the things that weren't said, it reminds me of when you and I were meeting, you mentioned we are the tool. We are the therapeutic tool in this process. And which reminds me of the day we met, I had lunch because you and I met a couple weeks ago at Whole Foods and we were just kind of brainstorming and talking about some creative things. And I think I even said to you, I feel kind of burnt out. I don't even know what self-care is anymore. And you mentioned, we are the tool in the therapeutic process. So we have to be very mindful of what we do for self-care. So tell me about your self-care, because you're very busy and you have a lot of things going on. What do you do, or how do you set those boundaries?
Well, I set them out of necessity from not having set them for a long time, So I know that when Jacob was young and I was working and taking him to Atlanta, driving back because we lived out in the suburb of Gwinnett County, I gained 20 pounds and got shingles. And I was an absolute mess. I mean, I was in pain emotionally, physically. But I had to keep going, but I didn't have the energy to keep going. So through that very painful process, I realized it's really not a choice. I mean, I have to set some limits and take care of myself. I used to tell my husband, I'm going to be selfish and go to the gym. And after this experience, that echoed for me. And when I say echo, and I'm sure I get this from, my son being profoundly deaf, which he does have a cochlear implant, so he hears electronically. But I tell people and I teach people to listen for echoes. So when you say something and it resonates, or you say it, it's something that you've always said, but now because of a new experience, you say it and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit anymore. So when I would tell my husband I'm going to be selfish and go to the gym after this painful experience, I said it and I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to utilize self-care and I'm going to the gym. It is not selfish to go to the gym for an hour.
Right.
So I realized that what I used to think was selfish was really self-care. And it was necessary because, they used to say, when you put your gas mask on, you have to make sure you have a very tight seal before you help the person next to you. Because if you don't, you're going to get all the toxins and you're not going to be able to help anybody else. And it's the same thing, no matter who we are, whether you're in the military or not, we've got to get our mask on and we've got to have a tight seal before we spend energy helping someone else. So from then on, it was all about balance. And I still have to fight for it. I mean, sometimes for myself, in my own thought process, because I want to do for my kids. I want to be my friends. I want to do these other things. And I've got to stop and make sure I myself first. Yeah. So I do that because I have to. So I do my exercise. I have my quiet time. I have my down days or my downtime, and I realize that it's not all or none. If I was going to plan on this day, but now because of certain things and my priorities and my values, so if my daughter needs help with something or my son needs help with something, well, maybe that day turns into an hour, but I don't just totally wipe the day out and not do anything for myself.
Right.
I make sure that I do that.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you said it, depending on, that shows who you are, your values and your priorities, because that to me speaks volumes, because I think a lot of the times we're quickly, moms especially, we're quick to put our stuff on the back burner and then just say, oh, I'll do it next week or I'll do it, next time. And if you've got 20 minutes, there's something that I can find that I can do. So I'm glad that you said that. And I'm glad that you brought up like values and priorities, because you're right. The way that we view it when something unexpected happens, how do we take that in and do we become resentful, or do we see it as an opportunity to do?
But I love that you said that. Do we become resentful, or do we see it as an opportunity? We become resentful because we have not prioritized ourselves. And then we blame the other people, the circumstances or things that we are, being driven to jump in and help or do whatever we need to do for them. But we're resentful when we haven't first prioritized ourselves. If we prioritize ourselves, we're not resentful.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Less likely to be.
That's true. No, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's just wisdom. I mean, that's not therapeutic. That's just wisdom from living a life and figuring out like what we need. And I love it. Thank you.
And doing everything the hard, long way first, and having to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've done that many times.
Yeah. Me as well.
Right.
This episode of The Therapy Show is sponsored by my favorite fitness apparel, Zyia Active. I recently discovered Zyia Active when I went looking for high quality and premium workout clothes. Just like those luxury store and catalog brands, yet I wanted a budget-friendlier price tag. I love this brand because number one, I live a very active lifestyle. I hit the gym about 5 days a week, plus I love to go for runs and long walks, which I consider to be my very important self-care and podcast listening time. Plus, the endorphins I get from my workouts keep me in my happy mental space. The clothes stay put, I'm not constantly pulling on my leggings or tugging on my sports bras, and they accentuate me in all the right places. And number two, when I work from home, I love to be comfortable in leggings, also known as yoga pants, and a tank top. Plus, I can transition to running out the door to pick up our girls or run errands while still looking put together in my athleisure styles. My favorite workout leggings are the light and tights, and my favorite everyday wear are the everywhere pants. I literally wear them everywhere, every day. I can even wear them to business meetings or client consultations. I can dress them up or down easily. Want to learn more? Head over to lisamustard.com and click on the Activewear page. You can learn all about Zyia Active, the mission, the clothes, and see if they are a fit for you and your active life. From weight training to running to Zumba to yoga to CrossFit to bar to walking to tennis, Zyia Active has you covered. And don't forget about the active men in your life. They have an amazing men's line, plus clothes for active kids too. That's Zyia like papaya active. So see my site for all the details.
Okay, well, this is such a great interview. I'm really enjoying this. So let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, before we hop into what you are working on now and what's coming out in the near future, can you transition us into your military, like what you did in the military and how this new project kind of came about? I think it's really cool.
Oh, sure. So I joined the Air Force in 1991, which was right out of high school. Mm-hmm. So at 18, a lot of people, when they find out I was in the Air Force, they asked me if I flew planes, and I did not fly planes. You don't want me doing that. I was 18, so I was enlisted. Enlisted typically means non-college educated, but there are so many enlisted that are getting their degrees now. But definitely non-commissioned. I was not an officer.
Right.
So officers fly planes, and you want them flying planes.
Right.
So I was in transportation. So the traffic management office, which really sounds like I drove a bus around, and I did not. I don't think you want me doing that either. Though I did drive forklift.
Very cool.
So traffic management office, they now call it logistics. Mm-hmm. So it was anything that needed to be shipped. So even my husband, who was a ranger at Fort Lewis, Washington, the rangers would come over to our hangar, and we would put them on the C-130 airplane, and they would, go deploy and jump in to wherever they were jumping into. So rangers, whether it be rangers, whether it be the Marines, whether it be the equipment that they would need once they got there. So we shipped everything. So you think about shipments for missions, but then also for day-to-day life. So we worked with contract carriers, the commercial trucking companies. So we contracted with them. Even household goods. So when a military person was moving from one location to another, I worked with the civilian carrier that would go in and pack them up and drive their stuff to the new base. And then I also worked in the hangar. I worked in the warehouses. So sometimes I'd be wearing my BDUs, which is your battle dress uniform. I was in a long time ago. Mine was the woodland green. It wasn't the digi camo stuff you see now. So I was in a long time ago. Whether you were wearing BDUs or whether you were wearing your dress blues, it would depend on what location you were at. So I was in transportation. That's what I did first. And my husband was in the Army as a ranger. So getting out of the military, working and going to school full time, originally with the English goal, English literature, but then transitioning based on my life experience, my values, and what I really wanted to spend the rest of my life doing, which would be walking alongside somebody, helping empower them to be their best self, to be resilient, to find meaning in struggle. So as a therapist and as a writer, which I think the two are, parallel for me, I had originally written the Optimal Response Initiative, just kind of the draft of it, just bare bones, without the military application to it. So it's really a lot of foundational resiliency skills about how to respond more optimally to, just day-to-day things as well as extraordinary things, and to internal things such as thoughts, emotions, memories, and to external things, all those things we can't control, people, places, things, circumstances. So it's a lot of foundational skills that I wrote kind of bare bones. And then when I took the job that I currently have now working with veterans, I decided I really do not want to present this material to them in just kind of plain bare bones, everyday life type stuff. I want it to be written in military language, military culture. I want to meet them where they're at. Mm-hmm. And you really need to speak the language to meet them where they're at. A lot of times, and I don't either, because I'm much like John Wayne, just kind of shoot straight from the hip. Mm-hmm. I'm a little rough around the edges. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want someone talking to me in soft foo-foo language with analogies that make absolutely no sense to me.
Right.
Right. So I took the foundation and I just immersed it in military culture, military language, military culture. It's camo on the cover. There's military stuff throughout the entire book. When I talk about the 4 areas of health, physical, cognitive, emotional, and spiritual. I look at all areas of health. But for my military people, I say, you would, in no way would you go on a mission or a convoy without making sure all the gas tanks were full. Mm-hmm. So if you think about health as 4 gas tanks, physical, emotional, cognitive, spiritual, what do you need to do on a day-to-day basis that is going to put fuel in your tanks? Because you need them full for the next day to go on your journey to do what you need to do. And so, from the beginning, we start talking about health and we start talking about, what do you do to fill your tanks? And I talk about the 80-20 rule. Life is 80-20, which I got from my previous supervisor, now colleague, Dr. Paul Rasmussen. He's just amazing. And he taught me about the 80-20 rule, which then it really originates from Pareto's principle, which 1896, don't quote me on that, but Pareto was an Italian economist. And what he realized is that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. Mm-hmm. That principle has been applied to a lot of things. In a organization, usually 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. Mm-hmm. In a spiritual community, usually 20% of the people are given 80% of the donations. Mm-hmm. So the 80-20 rule. Mm-hmm. When that is applied to life, 80% of life is hard, 20% is great. Right. And the 80%, if you break it down to 40-40, 40 is trauma and loss. If you live long enough, you're going to have loss, right, which usually involves trauma. The other 40% is the boring, mundane stuff that none of us like to do, but it's what we need to do. We got to go to the grocery store. We got to pay taxes. We got to brush our teeth. We got to do the laundry. It's just the kind of ho-hum, boring stuff that is part of life. And then 20% is the fun stuff. Mm-hmm. And, especially as you get older, and for me, a mom or someone who's a dad, or, the more responsibilities you get, I've never seen anybody, no one has ever come up to me and said, Kristina, you're really not getting your 20%. What can I do for you to give you that 20%? Can I, do all these things for you so you can have a moment? No. And if we wait for someone to do that, that's not going to happen. Right. So you've really got to carve it out for yourself. This goes back to self-care. What is your 20%? Mm-hmm. And what do you need to do to carve that out? Whether it's 5 minutes of a, Les Brown inspirational video, or which I make sure that if that's my 5 minutes, that's what I do. What is your 20% and how are you going to carve it out? So when I talk to the military people about your 4 gas tanks, what kind of things can you do in all those areas to fill those tanks? And I do need to say, not everybody values spirituality, but I do. I know a lot of people who do. I don't put a specific name or belief system to that. It's just spirituality, whatever that is for people. So what do you need to do to fill that tank? Sometimes someone will say, I need to get outside nature. I need to listen to some music. I need to just be in silence. Whatever it is for somebody, make sure you do that 5 minutes, because day by day, that's your 20% for the day. You've got 20% that you can do for your week. Mm-hmm. There's things we do on the weekend that we don't have the time or energy to do during the week. So we do them on the weekends, mm-hmm. And then there's things that you might do once a month for the 20% for the month. And then for the year, people go on vacation. Hopefully, I'm going to start. I spent 20 years in school, working and going to school. So the vacations really weren't part of the process. But, for once a year, what are you going to do that takes more time and energy that you can't do the rest of the time? So the 80-20 applies to life. Right. I apply it to also their structure, their daily structure for their moment to themselves or what they do, whether it be their workout or their reading. I help them create structure because if you're active duty, you've still got all that structure and you don't have a lot of time to yourself. Right. So even in the midst of that, how are you going to create that time for yourself? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do in the midst of all that you can't control that is for you? Because you can do enjoyable things while you're doing very unenjoyable things. Sure. And then if you're out of the military, a lot of times it's that all or none. It goes from highly structured to now I've been medically retired, or now I'm retired, or now I'm out because I decided to not re-enlist. Or I didn't have the option to not re-enlist. I mean, there's many things, right, outside of our control. So how are you going to create that structure? Because you don't want to go from highly structured to no structure, right. And you want to do it based on your values. based on your health. And you have to realize that the 80-20 exists.
Yeah.
Because if you fight it your entire life, you're going to be angry and resentful because it does exist.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
So many good nuggets. So much good stuff. You and I, because I also work with the military population. And so I'm sitting over here nodding my head and saying, wow, yeah. It's so true. When they go from active duty and then they don't re-enlist or they retire out. And, I work with a lot of folks who are retiring, but they retire now and they're young and they still have another career in front of them. So it's another process of, okay, your life is about to go into chapter 3 or chapter 4. What's this going to be like for you? It's fascinating to work with this population. So I think that's another reason why you and I was so drawn to you, because I was like, oh, she gets what I do. She gets me. We can talk the same language.
Yes.
And I want to tell you that we are the same age. You know this. You and I know this. And when in 1991, when you were enlisting in the Air Force, I was in college, and going into the military was the furthest thing from my mind. I was one of those people. I was scared to death to go into the military. So I have to give major props, and you have my utmost respect for being a young woman in the early 90s, enlisting and just doing something that's so brave and courageous. And so thank you for your service, and thank you for what you've done and paved the way for a lot of us ladies in our 40s, because you have some really great things going on, and I'm super proud to know you.
Well, thank you. And can I say one thing about the enlisted population?
Sure.
So I appreciate all those kind words, but honestly, I was not trying to do anything brave or courageous or, American Pie and all that good stuff, though. I mean, that's part of it. But I was really trying to get out of a bad situation and get to a better situation. Sure. A lot of the enlisted population, when you look at just the demographics, very young, right? So usually 18, 20. Most of the enlisted, not all, but many of the enlisted population are leaving a bad situation. So whether it be, and it's typically lower SES, they're in places where there's limited opportunity. A lot of them have already experienced many traumas, from violence in the community to violence in their homes to alcohol, drugs, different forms of abuse. Many of their parents didn't have a lot of opportunities. And so they're literally trying to get out of a bad situation in hopes for something better. And I have not had a single enlisted person that I've worked with who hasn't told me that. Yeah. Like they were leaving something and hoping for something better. My older brother had joined the Army a year before me, and I knew that I wasn't Army material. It was either, wasn't that tough? I literally went from cheerleading pom-poms to an M16. So, I was a cheerleader in high school. And I was dating my now husband at the time, who was a Ranger. And, he said, no offense, but you're really not the military type,
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean I'm not the military type? I can do this. I didn't think I could drive a tank like my brother. I hated heights. I don't even like ladders to this day. I wasn't planning on jumping out of planes like my then boyfriend. But it was either the Air Force or the Navy. And I've never been a fan of water necessarily, unless I'm listening to the waves or watching it.
Right.
So I thought, okay, Air Force,
Yeah, there you go.
And my uncle Wilsey, who's a Marine, he would say I'm joining the Chair Force because, Marines are the few, the proud. I should know that motto. I don't know the motto. The few, the proud, the Marines.
I think so.
It's like the toughest, right?
Yeah.
So I've gotten teased in my family, but I joined the Air Force to get out of a bad situation and to have more opportunity.
Yeah.
And I am glad I did it, but I did go from cheerleading pom-poms to an M16. So it was a bit of a shocker for me. I was a lot like, because you're my age, who Private Benjamin is. Goldie Hawn.
Yeah.
I love Goldie Hawn in Private Benjamin. But I was that on the inside, but no one was going to find out. I was going to fake it till I made it.
Yeah. So
I did just that. But that's why I joined.
I think that's awesome. I just don't think I could have faked it at all. So kudos to you. And also, I think the timing was so different. But I versus 1999, 2000 or 2001, when people were enlisting for different reasons. After 9/11, people were enlisting. But I do talk to a lot of enlisted soldiers who, totally agree with what you're saying. That is been my experience as well. Everything like is spot on. So I'm glad you pointed that out, and I'm glad that you shared. Thank you for giving us that insight into your life, into where you were at the time. So let's talk a little bit about the book. When does it come out? When is it going to be available?
Yeah, so the Optimal Response Initiative, it's done.
Yay.
It will be on Amazon in about 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
Probably more like 4 weeks. I have to give the official go light on that. And so it's 16 chapters. It's written in workbook form. So you can really take it, do it on your own if you want to, where literally you read the section and then it asks you some questions about reflecting on what really resonated with you. It helps you set up structure and short-term and long-term goals for yourself to address your health. And it teaches foundational things that honestly, when I think about the military population and a lot of the reasons that people join, they did not have typically parents who taught them foundational ways to look at day-to-day stress, let alone extraordinary stress. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, many people are operating from an external location of control. If the weather's nice, I'm doing good. If the weather's rainy and horrible and cold, I'm doing bad. Right. So that's just a simple example of being externally controlled versus internally controlled based on, regardless of the weather, I am focused. I'm going to have a good day, regardless that it's raining and cold and it's making my pain worse. That's not my focus. I'm going to focus on the fact that I have a good cup of coffee and I have people that I'm walking alongside, and that's going to determine the quality of my day. It's my perspective. Mm-hmm. So, just things like that, operating from an internal location of control versus an external. And how do you do that? But even backing up, I talk about health. I talk about the stress response that goes on in the body and what you can do about it. The stress response people know as flight or freeze response, the survival response. It's what's going on when people are dealing with post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. It's like the survival response stuck in the on position. So I back it up to talking about the stress response versus the at-rest response and how you can shift it based on your breathing, mm-hmm. based on your thought process, based on your breathing, based on your thought process. The two need to balance up and be congruent. So how do you get a hold of your breathing? How do you get a hold of your thoughts? What are you saying to yourself? What is your internal dialogue? A lot of times I had a Marine say to me recently, what do you mean internal dialogue? Are you like talking to yourself, Doc? You walk around talking to yourself all the time? I'm like, well, I have been known to talk to myself. This is true. I've been known to answer myself too. Do I do it all the time? No, but I do it.
Right.
But what are you saying to yourself? Are you encouraging yourself or are you beating yourself up?
Right.
Are you the encouraging kind of battle buddy or are you the hardcore drill sergeant?
Right.
The drill sergeant mentality works for certain things for short term, mm-hmm. but long term, none of us are motivated by threats. Right. We're motivated by encouragement. We're motivated by understanding who we are and what our strengths are and how do we capitalize on those. Mm-hmm. So it's like each section, each chapter is really written to read it and then reflect, read it and reflect. If a group of people did this on their own, it would be much like the book club. Everybody mm-hmm. read, everybody come and talk about what resonated with you and why. And that's really how I operate the groups that I do. Mm-hmm. I do facilitate it. I do lead it. I play encouraging, powerful videos at the beginning. I assign homework where they need to do the same thing. But essentially you read, you reflect, and you come back and you share and you learn from one another. Mm-hmm. So that's really how the Optimal Response Initiative is set up. How do you respond more optimally mm-hmm. to extraordinary stress as well as ordinary stress, just day-to-day stress that goes back to the 80-20 that mm-hmm. I talked about as well. But I do want to say, and I wish I had an image that I could show, but if you think about a line, a continuum, on one end is the most optimal response we could have. On the far end is the very worst response that we could have. So if I am having physical pain, so that's just internal within me, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm having physical pain and my response is, I cannot deal with this one more moment, I'm just going to quit. That would be more towards the worst response that I could have towards that physical pain, because that's not going to help me feel better. It's going to make the pain worse over time. Mm-hmm. And not to say that we should ignore it and say, I have no pain, I'm fabulous, and I'm in complete denial. we don't want to do that either. We don't want to go from one extreme to the next. But if I have that physical pain and I say, okay, and you notice I take a breath, which I do a lot for myself, whether it be my own things or in response to other things, I take breath. It's like, okay, I have pain, but what is my motivation today? How am I going to take this pain and use it to my advantage? I'm not going to use it for an excuse. I'm going to use it to help me propel forward. So I'm in pain, but I'm not going to let that stop me. So that's moving closer towards optimal on the continuum, which is, it's not going to get rid of the pain, but it's going to help me deal with it.
Right.
It's also going to help me have more enjoyable emotions, and those emotions are going to propel me to act in ways that are in line with my values and my goals. So I'm moving more towards optimal. So at any point on this continuum, which way are you moving? So what I teach people is to say, am I going to the right or am I going to the left? And even if you're, on the worst side but you move to the right and you're still like behind the 50-yard line, like you're still over here, fine. But at least you're moving to the right. So because the more you move to the right, you create a new pattern and you eventually get closer and closer to optimal. The goal is not to have the most optimal, perfect response. I mean, perfect doesn't exist, but it's like, what direction am I moving? And most of us know in our gut, in our mind, in our heart, that's moving to the left and that's moving to the right. And so even if you move 1 centimeter to the right, you're moving 1 centimeter to the right. And so I'm trying to get, especially the military, people who are so used to that go big or go home, all or none mentality. As my husband says, you're either in the plane or you're out the plane. There's no in the middle. If you find yourself in the middle, that's not a good place to be, if you're stuck. And so, what direction are you moving? It's not all or none. It's just, am I moving this way or that way? And I think that really helps people find balance, realizing that, I just want to be moving towards optimal instead of worse, and that's good enough. One of the things that I say to myself and I teach people to say is, I'm doing the best I can with who I am, with where I am, and the resources I have. And that's usually true. No matter what's going on, you're trying. Most of us are doing the best we can.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. And I am so excited to get my hands on this book when it is finally published and it is out there. Where will we be able to find it?
You will be able to find it on Amazon.
Okay.
So even on my website, KristinaSeymour.com, I'll have a link to Amazon where you can purchase it and, have it sent via Prime to your house or to a friend or to a child or a friend or a family member who's deployed or whoever you think needs it. Hopefully you'll read it and then share it with other people too. Yeah, it'll be on Amazon. And I do want to say that there's also some additional things that I can send to you once you get it. I've got some passes that I've had created, an idiot pass, a compassion pass. These are not things that we hand out to people. They're things that, it's the size of a business card and you keep it in your back pocket. But essentially, if you have somebody that is, not really working on optimal in their life, I mean, we're going to call them an idiot, though I don't call them an idiot. It's just, most of us have called someone an idiot at some point, even if it's when we're driving and it's just the people on the road.
Right. Yeah.
Which can be us sometimes. But, an idiot pass is, I'm just going to give this person a pass. I'm not going to hand them over my power and try to, win them over or explain my cause or my plight to them right now, because they're not going to get it and they really don't care in this moment. The compassion pass is the pass you give to those people who really have your best interest at heart. They just don't get it. And it would be exhausting to try to get them to get it as well. So a compassion pass, I'm just going to kind of let this person go. I'm not going to wear myself out trying to explain how things are for me right now and how they don't get it, because they don't get it. They'd like to, but they don't. So those are just two tools. They are in the book, but I have created some cards that people can carry around in their back pocket. And then there's a challenge coin that comes with the book as well. If you finish the entire thing and you tell me what you got out of it, I'll send you a challenge coin.
That's awesome.
As a constant reminder. And it says, stay alert, stay alive, and thrive. Stay alert, stay alive. Military people are pretty darn good at, all or none, and go big or go home and focus on the mission. And the military teaches people to do that. However, the big piece that is missing is the thriving part, thrive in life. So how do you thrive? And which is really what the Optimal Response Initiative is focusing on. It's meeting you where you're at, but it's taking you where you're trying to go, as far as health. and balance. And so it teaches the thriving part of life. And so the coin is a constant reminder that, yes, stay alert, stay alive, but also thrive, be present in the moment, enjoy your life, take care of yourself, find balance, find a way to contribute. And so the coin is a constant reminder. And so, and if I do run into somebody in public that I know has done, I will challenge them, and I do want to see the coin.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a beautiful coin, by the way. You showed it to me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I have a couple coins from work, so your coin is really cool. So if you're out there, military folks, and you want a really cool coin, then you've got to take Dr. Kristina up and get her book and work through it, and not just survive, but thrive. And that's what we want for everybody. We want everybody to be thriving and be successful and reach their goals and feel healthy and confident. And so before we end, I did want to ask a question. So I imagine we may have some therapists out there who would like to write a book or have an idea. So what would be your best advice for them?
So if somebody wants to write a book, and there are a lot of people that have thought, I need to write a book, or people have told them you really need to write a book, but how do you get started? So essentially I tell people to think of a theme that is going to run throughout. So usually people can identify that, or if they think about it for a moment, they can identify it. So it's kind of like if you envision a red thread that is weaved throughout the entire story, what theme does that thread represent? What is the theme? So, for example, when I wrote my novel, Where the Red Cardinals Fly, which is a story of kind of the first half of my life, I guess, up until boot camp in the military and getting out of the military, I wanted to write the story about overcoming and surviving, and there would be trauma in it, and there is trauma in it. Not a lot, 2 traumatic incidents, not in great detail, but some. I could have chosen from many traumas that happened repeatedly. I didn't want that to be the entire book. The 2 that I chose matched and went with my theme. And what was my theme? My theme was essentially going from darkness to light, going from hopelessness to hope, finding peace in the midst of darkness, And so for me, the theme was wondering, where do red cardinals fly when Seattle winters get cold and harsh? Knowing that they fly to a place of warmth and peace. Kristina, which I was 5, when the book started, Kristina desires to find the place of warmth and peace where the red cardinals fly. And so figuratively, I find it here. And then physically, I find it in my new circumstances as an adult that I have, arrived at through a lot of overcoming and through a lot of other people helping me along the way too, I need to say. And so the theme of, finding peace, going from darkness to light, that kind of thing. So I tell people, think of the theme that you want to run throughout, because that's your message, essentially. Right. It helps you then find your title. And once you have your theme and once you have your title, you have your story. It's just because you already have your story. It's in here, It's just a matter of creating that structure so that it can have the theme and the pathways that you then write out. Then I know it doesn't make much sense, but it creates the roadmap, I guess.
Right.
And it matches the theme. And I tell people, you want to create an outline, moments that you want to make sure you have in there. What are those moments in your life that match that theme, that help tell that story, that support that theme? And, just like any good movie or book, you have your beginning, you have some kind of climax, and you have the end. And as long as it matches that theme, it will make sense. It will have that cohesive narrative. So I usually tell people, once you have your theme and once you have your title, the rest is history. Yeah. Like the rest is, then you just keep moving towards that. That's my best advice for people, I think.
Awesome. And you do coaching, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So, yes. So if somebody wants to write their story, I can help them do that. So sometimes it's helping them, have discussions about the theme, about specific moments in their life. What is the meaning? What did they make from that? What is the message that they have come to? Or a lot of times they're trying to come to that message, right? They're trying to figure that out. And so I will talk with them, and what they share is what they share, meaning that's what's on the top of their heart, the tips of their tongue. And sometimes what they initially share is it. Sometimes it takes a couple conversations to get there. And I help them figure it out for them. So I don't ever tell them or figure it out for them. I might have ideas. I do not share them. I let them come up with it. I do give feedback. And once they identify their theme, does that align with your theme? What is the reason you're choosing that? Does that match? Or is that just kind of a squirrel that doesn't really make sense here or in it, Right. And essentially you've got stuff that is difficult and painful, which is the victim part. And then you've got your resilience that starts to break out, their mindset. If someone wants to write their story and share their story, they're there because they're already thinking, I got to write this. I want to give back. I want to capitalize on this. I want to help other people. I want to make sure that other people don't have to suffer like I did, or, so if they're wanting to write their story, they're already there. So I kind of help them pull those meanings out, the way they want to contribute through message and hope. And then, I help them kind of bring it full circle. It can be anything from 4 hours of, 4 separate hours of a conversation to another 4. So I usually do it in increments of 4. And then once they have gotten it out, sometimes people just run with it and start to write it. Sometimes they want to do a chapter and then they want to work with me for another 4 hours or, whatever it might be. Sure. So it just depends. I have different packages because it depends on where somebody is. But once it is written, then I have my team. I have someone who can edit. I have someone who can lay it out graphically, work on the cover, the design, the overall message, get that copyright and that ISBN number, and then eventually get it to Amazon. So I have the full service team that can help them do that. It just really depends where they're at. Okay. But I have something for everybody depending where they are.
Well, I think that is an incredible package offering. And I love, as you're sharing what it's like to work with you, all I kept thinking of was, wow, it sounds a lot like therapy. It sounds a lot like the process of therapy. So
right.
If you're listening right now and you are in good hands, because not only is she an incredible writer, she's an incredible therapist. And I love everything you just said. I mean, that's it right there. So I'm excited for people who reach out to you. And so the best way to reach you, is it through your website?
Yes, okay. It is. So KristinaSeymour.com. Okay. And you can email me at Kristina@KristinaSeymour.com. and find other contact information, including my phone number there as well.
And you can also see the other books that you've written, because you've written quite a few. I mean, so we didn't even talk about, the warrior mom and family. We didn't even talk about that today. So maybe we'll come back and do another podcast on that, because that's in itself another incredible workbook and book that you've written. So
thanks.
Is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have asked as we wrap things up?
I mean, I think that one thing that I want the listeners to know, period, is that there is hope and they're not alone. So whether they're a therapist that's burnt out, a mom who is tired, a military person or spouse or civilian, whoever you are and wherever you are, there's hope and you're not alone. You just want to get connected and stay connected. So that you remember that on a day-to-day basis, and don't forget to take care of yourself. It's important to remember that self-care is not selfish. So I just want that to kind of be the resounding message, and tell your story, share your story, and connect with others.
Yeah. Well, I love it. And I'm so grateful that you came on the therapy show today and you shared all your good stuff with us. So
Thank you
guys, you're welcome. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in. And come back soon to hear from our next guest. So take care.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to The Therapy Show. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the podcast. Thank you.